NTV.
Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here at Morning at NTV. Let's delve into our very first conversation of the day, decriminalizing petty offenses. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that COVID-19 has showed us is the fact that there are some conversations we must have, and as jails feel, one of these is the vague provisions of the Penal Code Act. Yes, on being idle and disorderly or being a rogue and vagabond. These provisions, according to the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum, criminalize a wide range of public discourse. And to speak to us about this and more, we have Nicholas Opio, a human rights lawyer who is the executive director of Chapter 4 Uganda, and Proscovia Balo, who is also a human rights activist. They join me right now in studio. Very good morning, Ms. Abalo and Opio.
Thank you for having us in this very cold Monday morning.
I know, right? It's raining cats and dogs.
Good morning.
Let's delve into this conversation. First of all, before we get into decriminalizing petty offenses, let's talk about a story that broke at least last week. We saw a student come out to petition a court asking that police act on the recommendations of the Parliament's Committee on Commissions, that is statutory and state enterprises, to investigate Bank of Uganda. Why would a case that involves Bank of Uganda need a petition for police to act?
Look, the COSASA reports, as are all reports of the committees of accountability in Parliament, have for a long time been gathering dust without any actions on them. Parliament will unearth a series of what they claim are criminal activities, the theft of public funds, the abuse of office, year in, year out, but nothing is done. I think that this petition, ill-conceived as it is an indictment on the commitment of state agencies to processes of accountability in Parliament. Ordinarily, you don't have to have an invitation of a vigilant citizen to kickstart a criminal investigation. The police and the DPP have the powers to initiate investigations if they think a crime has been committed. Over and over again, we see them focusing on other less serious or heinous crimes, such as idle and disorderliness, and not on people who have misappropriated billions of shillings.
We're going to get into that conversation of idle and disorderly.
But to come back to what I think was...
Yes.
I saw the petition by the young man. The petition was a letter. You don't move court by a letter. You move court by a formal plaint, a formal notice of motion. So the form in which he moved court was entirely wrong, and the forum in which he had gone to was wrong. But be that as it may, I think his actions has sparked some reactions. The CID has now confirmed that they are assembling a team to investigate the criminalities in Bank of Uganda.
Even before CID confirmed, we were asking ourselves, is this the new norm in the justice system?
It's not the new norm. It is just that we have let the CID and the investigative authorities get away with it. Parliament, not just COSASA, PAC, every year, you've seen, and NTV has done a good job of covering that, of people being grilled for misappropriation of funds. There is a brief detention, perhaps sometimes at the CID office in Parliament, but that's the last we hear of it. And so I think that we need to begin to put a focus on investigative reports of Parliament, because parliamentary investigations result from audits by the Auditor General. Every year there are audit reports coming out. We don't see a lot of actions on those audits. And then when Parliament has confirmed the findings in the audit reports, no investigations take place. We must begin to make that a center of our focus and attention so that people are held to account.
But you do understand, Mr. Opio, that this is a worrying situation. You have a case where authorities are not expounding or expediting investigations on their own. They're still waiting for someone to tell them, you know what, you need to look into this.
Yeah.
So let's get into our conversation.
But thankfully, we have a new director of public prosecution. She has a rich experience as a prosecutor. She's come in with a goodwill. She wants to do the right thing. So let's give her the benefit of the doubt and hope that this is a new era in that office.
Indeed. Expedite investigations. Don't wait for an invitation. That's what we are saying right here in Morning at NTV. Let's get into the conversation of decriminalizing petty offenses. Ms. Abalo Proskovia, tell us about the provisions in the Penal Code Act about rogue and vagabond, and what particular laws within the Penal Code Act don't you agree with?
I don't agree with the Penal Code 168 of, of looking at everybody who is idle, who is, moving on the street, not doing anything as somebody idle. Looking at a woman who is, in the evening, or categorizing them as a prostitute, as somebody who is idle. A law that says that when you are walking on the streets, you're doing nothing, you are idle. Now look at our economy. We have very many people who are poor. You have people who are struggling in life. Now you cannot just look at me and be suspicious and say, no, this one looks somebody who is wrong. This one looks somebody who is going to commit a crime. You are not suspecting me to commit a crime because I look, I look shabby, I look idle, I look not somebody who is very important in the society. So, and the law makes you really feel already guilty before you are placed before the court. So this, to me, I don't agree. And this law is subjecting the more vulnerable, the more poor people in the community, the more poor people in the society.
So in other words, the Penal Code Act criminalizes poverty.
It criminalizes poverty. So when you are poor, you are a criminal. So this, to me, it's very wrong. And that is why we as civil society, we are really struggling and want the government of Uganda, the lawmakers, to remove this code from our law.
Ms. Opio, how has the Penal Code Act, particularly idle, disorderly, rogue and vagabond laws, been abused?
Look, if you ask any policeman in this town, the Bible of policeman is the Penal Code Act. For them, every crime is contained in the Penal Code Act. But the Penal Code Act is an antiquated legislation. It's a very archaic colonial law enacted in 1950 when Uganda was still under colonial administration. The obtaining conditions at the time was to create a condition for the protection of the white colonial classes in our country. And there are many examples of that. You ask yourself why police stations are built in places where they are built. It was to keep away the poor from white colonial quarters. You have Central Police Station, Kira Road Police Station, Ginger Road, to protect the rich colonial areas. In your districts where you come from, there were African quarters, and there was senior quarters, there were white quarters. So the Penal Code Act was enacted at the time to protect the status quo, to preserve the colonial administration and keep them away from African who they saw as illiterate, saw as poor and dirty. And so the Penal Code Act is one such legislation. There are many provisions of the Penal Code Act that are really, 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 in the current dispensation, offensive. Take, for example, Section 177 about fouling the air. Do you know that farting can be an offense?
Yes.
If you fart and you cause the air to be noxious, it can be an offense. Really, in this age and era? So the Penal Code Act is an antiquated legislation, and I think that needs to be quickly reviewed. There's a second reason. Uganda enacted a new constitution in 1995 that heralded a new dispensation that focuses on the protection of individual liberties, human rights, that provides for non-discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, economic status, among other things. The Penal Code Act needed to be brought into conformity with that new dispensation. And so offenses contained in sections 167 and 168 on rogue and vagabond are just one in many other offenses that I think needs to be reviewed to bring it into conformity with current contemporary human rights standards. I'll give you an example. The offense of rogue and vagabond, anybody who wanders in a public place and cannot explain why they're there, okay? If you go to Centenary Park, if it is still there, if you go to the city square and you appear to be wandering about, okay, you're committing an offense and you will be arrested and charged. The maximum sentence for a petty offense is 6 months or a fine of 3,000 shillings. We think that Those provisions in the Penal Code Act, one, are discriminatory. They target people who are poor on the basis of their economic status. The vast majority of our people in this city, if that law is applied, strictly speaking, would be arrested for being idle and disorderly. And let me excite you and tell you this. At one point, a High Court judge was arrested for being idle and disorderly. He was crossing the road from Aristoc. It used to be on Kampala Road. And there was an operation to clean the streets of the poor.
Yes.
So that those of us who are not like them can enjoy ourselves. And they swept the High Court judge. By the time he explained himself, he was at CPS. So we think that that law has no place in the current human rights dispensation.
It has no space in the current human rights dispensation, but it's working for the authorities in Uganda. I mean, you talked about the Constitution, 1995. We saw in the early 2000s the amendment to the Constitution to pave way for President Museveni to come and contest again in 2006 for another term. We also saw the amendment of the Constitution to allow for multi-party politics to take center stage. But we haven't seen any review for such laws in the Penal Code Act that actually are racist, if you use that word. Why has it taken so long?
So two things in my view. First, there's a general sense that the law works for the powerful. It's not for the common man.
I hear you.
That legislation and laws exist to preserve the status quo for those who are benefiting from it. It's not for the poor. And like that statement is true, that we are focusing on legislation that will make trade and business good for businessmen, but not doing much to help the vast majority of our people who are poor to lift them out of poverty. We are providing tax breaks to rich investors to come and invest in this country and allow them to exploit our labor. Just go to Namanga and see our people suffer. So the law has focused on helping the powerful and ignored the poor for far too long. And we're saying this has to change. The result of it has been, go to prisons. The most productive section of our population are incarcerated. People in prison are people mostly between the ages of 18 and 35. The most productive age in one's life are incarcerated. So we are depriving a large section of our community from productive engagement in society. And so the failure has been occasioned, in my view, by weaknesses of institution. The Ugandan Constitution creates what is called the Law Reform Commission, a commission mandated to review laws and make sure that these laws are brought into conformity with the Constitution.
Yes. To
make sure that laws are revised so that laws that are struck out by the courts are removed from the statutes. But the Law Reform Commission, I would submit, has not been very active and done its part. If it had, we wouldn't have sections in the law that have been struck out by the courts and are still there. I think the last time that we had a revision of our laws was in the year 2000, when we came up with the red volumes and the blue volumes. The time for the Law Reform Commission to wake up and make sure that they do their work is now.
Indeed. Proscovia Abalo, let's talk about the fact that 4,000 people have been arrested right here in Uganda ever since we instituted a curfew. Can you imagine that? 4,000 people in our jails as a result of breaking curfew. Is this provided for in the law?
No.
Explain.
It is not provided for in the law. No, this is still under petty offense to me. I'm taking an example of women in Lira. 3 weeks ago, women were arrested on streets selling bananas, selling, those petty things for themselves, for their family, to support their families. And they were arrested. Look at the border men who are struggling. Yes, they could have, moved against the law, but this was not provided in the law. This is a kind of law that came in which is not supportive to the poor, supportive to somebody who is struggling to vent for his or her families and for his or her children. Now the women were arrested. The border men are arrested. They are taken to prisons. They are detained. The others are put in remand. The family is back at home suffering for these mothers, for these children. Now a mother is arrested and taken to the cell, plus her baby. And then the children at home are also there, left and taken care of. Now, who is suffering the more? Who is struggling to see that this kind of law is scrubbed from our constitutions? looking at all this kind of, you know, situation put in place, this law, to me, I look at it as something that is supposed not to be put into the Constitution and scrubbed off. So the 4,000 people arrested during this curfew time, it is wrong, and I still urge that it's wrong. As civil society, we should come in and again sensitize our communities, sensitize the government, and let people know that this is not good for the benefit of our own community. The poor are suffering the more. You know, they can't bribe their way out of the law. They can't bribe their way out of the police cell. They can't bribe their way out of the prisons. It is the rich that get away, and the poor suffer the more. So this is something that, as civil society, we want to really petition the government. We want to petition, you know, everybody that is concerned to hear our cry, to advocate for the rights of the poor. That as the government, you're supposed to protect, you know, provide. So what after arresting all these people? Don't we see that we are giving more problems and burden to the families? The economy does not support the poor.
So if I may add, that these laws disproportionately affects the poor.
Indeed.
And I think that we have to be humane and look at the effect of the law. LDUs and policemen are very enthusiastic in whipping people. The point that we make to them is that let's have a human face to the law. Because the law is not some, you know, detached set of words. It's supposed to work in a human society.
Yes.
What does beating a woman selling fruits on the roadside help you? What does locking up a woman, clutching onto the naked body of her baby and sending her and the baby to prison for selling fruits on the street help all of us? It serves no purpose.
It seems like the tormentor only changed uniform.
We have to have a human face. We know that COVID is a serious problem. We know that we must deal with COVID. But we also must not allow our people to die of poverty, to die of our own brutality. We haven't registered COVID deaths, but COVID regulations have led to so many people being killed. I think that we need to have a human face to the law. And this begins by taking care of our very weakest. Secondly, the move to decriminalize petty offences, it's not just a Ugandan move. It's an African Union move. It's embraced by everybody across the country, I mean across the continent. We invite our lawmakers to ensure that Uganda becomes a member of the African enlightened countries, taking care of their weakest and removing laws that were left here by the British. The report of the African Commission was in fact written by a Ugandan, the former chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the late Medi Kagwa, may his soul rest in eternal peace, when he was the special rapporteur on situations of prisons and policing in Africa. And so this is not just something that civil society are dreaming about. It's part of a continental move to make sure we have a human face to our law, to make sure we take care of our very weakest, and start by removing laws that criminalize you for being poor on a public road.
Maybe my viewers are not understanding the gist of this conversation, Ms. Proskovia Balo, but help them understand this. When you call for the decriminalization of petty offences, what exactly do you mean? Isn't this a risky venture for our security as a country?
No, it is not a risky venture at all. Now, we already say that as there are some laws in our constitutions, which is, petty offences is one.
So if they are removed, they won't actually put a dent on our security in Uganda?
It will
I'll
not
tell you what creates insecurity, oppressing the poor.
When a poor person is making noise, is not silent, the rich person cannot be at peace. Imagine I'm very poor, I have nothing to eat in my house. You know, what I can only do is to struggle, to make sure that I go and break your gate. I get money, I get food, and I eat. Now, if the government does not provide for me, a poor woman, a poor man, how will I survive? And that means that this law of petty offences of rag and vagabond, whether it stays in our constitution or not, it will not, you know, it will not have anything to do with, you know, increasing economy or income capacity of the people of Uganda. What we need is make people have something to eat in their homes. Economy should be equal. Everybody should be balanced. Have something, you know. People should work. People should have, you know, homes. People should have decent life to live in. So without that, this law will not be applicable, and still it will suffer. Now look at a poor man, a poor woman being arrested. The police, after arresting you, will need money from you to bail you out. For you to bail yourself out, you need to pay money. Remember, I don't have the money. You got me walking on the street because I'm idle and disorderly, because I was sitting maybe in a park, and I sat there the whole day after moving, roaming Kampala the whole day because I didn't have anything. So I sat and arrested. I arrested. Now, when after my sitting down and getting my rest, you come and arrest me. I don't have anything.
But we are getting information from government that no one has been arrested for being idle and disorderly, at least since 2016, when the president pronounced himself on the matter and he said no one should be arrested for being idle and disorderly. Well, of course, the numbers we showed you, the 4,000 people were arrested for breaking curfew. Now, do you agree with like the spokesperson Freddie Nanga when he says we haven't been arresting anyone since 2016 as a result of being either disorderly or rogue and vagabond? Do you agree with such statements?
No, I don't agree. Look, go to Kamocha. Many people have been arrested in Kamocha because of taking marijuana, because of taking, drugs. And others are just arrested because the police are suspicious. They're looking shabby, they're looking ugly, they're not smart. No, this one, because he is poor, because he doesn't afford a decent dress, to clothe himself, he's arrested. And that he's arrested not because he has broken any law. This is already an idle and disorderly arrest. He's not doing anything that is, providing to the economy. He's not adding any value to the economy. And that's why that person is arrested. So the police will not come openly and tell you that we are arresting you because you are idle and disorderly. They're going to put any charge. They're going to hide that into that. And then they arrest this innocent or this poor man and woman. Now, looking at a prostitute on the street, as I was telling you before, you cannot come and have an evidence that I've got a woman standing on the street. She has been selling herself, which is against our law in Uganda anyway. So there's no evidence. You've not gotten her into the act, but you're arresting her. What is the basis that you're arresting her there? Why are you arresting that person?
Now, Ms. Opio, let's talk about how we can ensure that this law is not abused from the point of legislation. Because police will tell you we are just the enforcers. We do not make the laws. It's Parliament's duty. So how can we ensure that such laws are not abused?
Well, first of all, my good friend Nanga cannot be the standard for you here. I think he suffered his fair share of blame. But I can tell you that people are still being arrested for being rogue and vagabond, regardless of the president's pronouncements. Prisons will tell you don't have anybody in prison charged of the offense. But go to a police station. There's a small court in Nakawa, in Luzira. It's hidden away in some residential area that every day is locking up people away for being rogue and vagabond. There are people in police cells that are still being charged or held in police cells. They may be released, not taken to jail or court, but they are being arrested because of that offense. We are saying that we must allow every member of our society to participate in our economy, regardless of class. And there are ways we can do it.
Yes.
First, let's strike out the law from the law books. Parliament must do its job. The Uganda Law Reform Commission must undertake the role that was given to them by Parliament to review laws and ensure that these kind of laws are taken away from our law books. Two, we must ensure that the court system does not entertain any charges and incarceration of people on the basis of petty offences in our Penal Code Act. The courts must play an activist role and ensure that we don't entertain people being locked away for being idle and disorderly, for being rogue and vagabond. And lastly, we would invite the Ugandan state to embrace the African Union, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights initiative, to decriminalize, to remove from our law books, to make being idle not a criminal offense. In any event, I don't think anybody can be idle in this town.
All right. Ms. Abalo, recommendations in a minute for the government.
No. When you arrest an individual, we have a lot of community work that should be done. Now, if somebody is found guilty of any charge of idle and disorderly, which I don't know, I believe anyway, please, I would beg the government to let people do community work. don't remove money from somebody. You're taking somebody to sell, to prison, and somebody has to pay.
Community service should be the
Yes.
alternative for jail time.
For jail time.
Right.
Look at the court environment. My court environment is very bushy. You know, why don't you let somebody go and slash and go back home? Than getting money from an individual. This
All
is
right.
something I wouldn't love to.
Proscovia Abalo, she's a human rights activist, and of course I did have Mr. Opio Nicholas, who is the executive director of Chapter 4 Uganda. He's also a human rights lawyer. The gist of the conversation, something I've learned today, is that the main issue here is poverty. If you do away with poverty, all this will go away. People won't be idle and disorderly. They won't be considered rogue and vagabond if poverty is not in the picture. My name is Romeo Busiku, and you're still watching Morning at NTV. Let's take another short break. We'll be right back with more information. Moving a muscle would be a mistake. We'll be right back.